Right. On the podcast this week, I'm joined by Randy Seaver. Those of you from Biddeford, Saco will recognize the name. He's a guy that's been a longtime journalist in the area, and his venues have changed over the years from the Courier to public access to being online, social media. He's a guy that brings up these great conversations in town, whether they're about local politics or local issues. A guy that I've followed for probably 10 years and just have always enjoyed the conversations that he's brought up. And finally decided to ask him to come on the podcast, and we just had a great conversation about the top 20 most influential local people to the Biddeford Saco area and just kind of going down one by one, talking about all of them. So if you're from the area and you know of Randy Seaver, I think you'll really enjoy this podcast. So this is the Randy Force Your podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube. Give me a like, leave a comment on a YouTube video. That's always helpful. And doing stuff like that means the world to me. So thanks again for listening. Here's Randy. All right, Randy Seaver, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Been following you on Facebook for a while. I think we've met a handful of times in person, but I always love how you do social media. You're always posting stuff that brings up great conversations. I love the stuff that you write. You have a whole history that goes way before all this stuff, and I want to kind of talk about all of it today if you're up for it.
Sure.
Would you mind sharing some of your background with me?
Sure.
Because I say that real quick just because I told my brother you're on, he's like, Randy from All Along the Watchtower public access show. And I feel like I missed that period somehow. So catch me up with all that.
That was back in 1999, 2000, 2001 in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically the real quick story is I'm basically born and raised here. We moved over to the Saco side when I was like 7 and I graduated from TA. But I lived all around the country for a while as an adult trying to figure out my way, my career path. And I came back to Maine. So in terms of journalism, I've worked at several different newspapers, but people in this area know me most because of my work with the Biddeford Saco Courier. I was hired by them in I think it was 98. Sometimes I go back and forth, whether it was 97, 98, but in that period. And so I've been covering this community for close to 30, coming up on 30 years. So doing it a while.
It's wild. How long did you work at the Courier for?
So again, I think they hired me, I think it was 98. They hired me in 98. I left in 2004 to go work with the Northwest Atlantic Marine Alliance, which covers this part of the Atlantic Ocean, which is the northwest part. And I did collaborative research reporting for them, but they approached me about 9 months later and asked me to please come back because it seemed like I was helping their circulation. So for advertising those. So anyway, so I came back and then for a couple more years, and I left in 2006 to join a firm called Barton & Gingold, where I did public communications and strategic communications. So then that job, pretty much Barton & Gingold got bought out by Power Engineers. I wasn't really super comfortable with that new arrangement, so I decided to go out on my own. And here I am.
Here you are. So tell me about the TV show they did on public access.
Yeah, so it was the same name as my newspaper column. It was called All Along the Watchtower. My initial host was Willie Nelson, a great guy. He passed away just late last year. Super guy. And then Brian Keeley, who was the best man at my wedding and my numero uno comrade in arms. I hung out at the Wonder Bar all the time. Anyway, Brian was actually the best man at my wedding. But so Brian was my co-host for the most of it. And I was just talking about that old show with Richard Rames, who was one of my guests. And Richard wasn't really happy with the questions I asked him. So, but there's that.
It sounds like an early form of a podcast, like a video podcast, right? You're just having people from the community. You're talking about whatever.
Exactly, it was. We had people at the public access studio help us out initially, and then we got other producers involved, and people loved it. It was considered, in Biddeford, Saco. Biddeford actually. It was called must-see TV on Thursday nights. We did a new episode, and we had this reputation for just doing these no-holds-barred kind of interviews where we just, we weren't afraid to put people in the spot, call them out. We just had a generally bunch of fun.
How many years did you do that for?
We did that. I think I have to ask Brian Keeley. I think we did it for at least a couple years, maybe 3. I'm not sure.
Yeah, okay. The reason I asked is I was going to say that's probably what it was, because the years that you mentioned are years that I was gone to college.
Yeah.
So my brother was a little bit younger than me, and he obviously had some awareness of it. And I feel like the pocket that you probably did, it was the pocket that I was away. So
Probably.
I have less of that familiarity. So it was a fun 3 years. Where'd the name come from? Why All on the Watchtower?
I get asked that a lot. I love the song, the original, the Bob Dylan version, and I just thought it was very appropriate because we're keeping guard over the city of Biddeford, Saco as a journalist, watching for threats, internal and external. So the name just kind of appealed to me, and I have this long history of just every installment of All on the Watchtower is a song title or song lyric. So just my appreciation for music crosses with my writing. So
that's awesome. I definitely associate that with you too, as do many people in the area as well.
Yeah.
Journalism's changed quite a bit since you got into it. Oh my God.
Yeah. I mean, going back 30, 40 years, social media has just changed everything. And now there are and we're just in a place where there's hundreds of channels available on television even. This was, when we were growing up, we had Walter Cronkite and, maybe Peter Jennings, and there were 3 or 4 people you could watch. Now it's just crazy. So there's good parts about that, and there are certainly negative consequences of that. So we've grown accustomed to customizing our news feed based on our own political biases. So Republicans like Fox News and Democrats, like MSNBC, and they never really cross over or intersect, and which leads to, I think, a little bit more of a divide. And I think news used to be the nightly news on TV used to be kind of like a public service. But once they started with a show like 60 Minutes, they realized, holy cow, we can make a lot of money doing hard-hitting news. And so, boom, we're off to the races, and it became about business rather than news. So
yeah, and now people just get pushed further and further into their echo chambers.
Absolutely.
And there's no way out, it seems like, a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And that's on a national level. I mean, I almost think too, like on a local level, this vacuum of local news since the Journal Tribune went away.
Well, and the Journal, not only did the Journal go away, but it was a trifecta of a perfect storm. The Journal closed its doors. The Portland Press Herald used to have a regular presence in the Biddeford Saco area. They had a bureau on Main Street for many years, and I remember Ted Cohen and Kelly Bouchard, and we would all go to the same council meetings. And the Courier at that time was completely independent, and it was locally owned, which made it a lot different than what it is today. Unfortunately, today it's just kind of it's used to generate ad revenue for the same people who own the Press Herald. So so people in Biddeford Saco are really in a news vacuum, unfortunately.
Well, it's been nice that Saco Bay News on Facebook. Well, I think of it on Facebook, but I know obviously there's a website, but I get most of the links to the articles, most often written by you, has kind of stepped in to fill that void in a nice way.
And that's all about Liz Godhelf, who used to work at the Tribune. Much later, I was at the Tribune back in the early 80s, but Liz was there when they closed, and she, God bless her. It's hard to start an online newspaper. I mean, she pays for libel insurance. She has to be the ad manager. She has to be the editor, the reporter, everything. It's really overwhelming. So I wanted to she approached me if I would be willing to help her out a little bit. And I'm very committed to local journalism. So I love doing it with her.
Well, I will say every time an article comes out from Saco Bay News, it's something that I personally click on. I think they do a nice job touching on things that are important in the community. And if they didn't do it, it's like, who would? Even everything from a business opening to some of the political stuff to anything. They do a pretty good job covering it.
Absolutely. And, and I think we have a new reporter now at the Courier, and I think she's very smart. She's very ambitious, and she's talented. So that's good news for us that we'll have a different set of eyes on things. But, going back to what Liz does, I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, every day it's a story about, a new ice cream shop opened up, or, this new restaurant's going in, or the Saco zoning board did this, or the Biddeford planning board did that. So she really puts in, it's way more than a 40-hour work week. It's just,
I'm sure
news never stops.
I know.
That's the problem.
I mean,
and we're competitive.
I'm sure.
Oh,
I'm sure. And it's good to hear they have a new hire too, because part of me thinks I see how committed you are going to these council meetings where there's nobody there and you're reporting on that stuff. Like, what happens when someone like you, who has this history, like, I don't know that this new hire will necessarily follow in your footsteps, but like, I just feel like you're, I don't want to say dying breed, but I don't know. Do you feel like you are,
Yeah, I do feel, I feel in a way that I'm a little bit in a unique position. And I think I have kind of an unfair advantage over the new career reporter. I mean, she and I have talked online a couple times, and we're trying to schedule time to actually sit down and have a cup of coffee. I'd like to, kind of point her in some good directions, but she's got to feel a little overwhelmed. I grew up here. I got First Communion at St. Mary's. I mean, yeah, I used to go to McKinney and Hurd Hardware and Murphy's Music, so I know Biddeford, and I've been covering Biddeford for 30 years. So over that time, I know all the different political figures. I've been writing about them. I have developed a huge of sources, people who will feed me information or tip me off about stuff with a confidentiality agreement. But so it takes time to cultivate that. It really does. And so hopefully I have a reputation where people know they can trust me. If they tell me about something, I won't use their names. I'll just go after it.
Yeah.
So,
and hopefully she takes inspiration from you. Hopefully there's other people around that take inspiration from you as well, because I think we need people that do what you do. So.
Yeah, we absolutely need another set of eyes. It's good to have fresh perspective, because I mean, I have my own biases, so, and I juggle the line between writing opinion and writing news. So I think, the more people we got who are willing to try to write news in this area, that's just the better for the community as a whole. It's not necessarily for me, but for the community.
100%. So the way I said, I like the way you do social media before. Like, do you have an approach or like a strategy to do it? Because I feel like you do a good job generating conversation, but like, you are pretty open-minded on things. I can maybe see some of your biases shine through in some ways, but like, I think you're pretty level-headed. Is that just how you are, or do you try to bring up conversations from that point of view?
I was raised by a couple of political junkies. Both of my parents were so into it, and we were so tuned into media as a kid. My dad ended up volunteering on Ted Kennedy's 1980 campaign to take off Jimmy Carter, and mom was just doing stuff. And just so I grew up in that environment. And I think what appeals to people is that when I write publicly, I try to be very open-minded. I definitely do a little bit of, pot stirring there. And I have my biases, and I try to have an open mind, and I try to engage respectfully. And, it's basically what I do. I've always loved talking about politics. I mean, I'm a kid who grew up watching Richard Nixon, leaving the South Lawn on Marine One, and that's it. I'm resigning. So, and I was 10. And I was really into that stuff, and talking about it. So that's just who I am. And I think people respond when somebody says to me, "Oh, you're a really good writer," or whatever, or "You're a really good reporter," or whatever. Not really. I'm mediocre at best. But what comes off, I think, for people who read my stuff, is that when you really love something, then you're good at it. And then people really kind of, because you put all your effort into it, because it's not just a job. It's not a 9-to-5 thing. This is who I am. This is my life. I'm into this, and I think that connects with people. You look at a guy like Jim Godbout, okay? Super great guy, doing all sorts of stuff because his heart's really in it. And that's just what makes him kind of an exceptional at his job, and why he's so good at his job.
He's a great example. And I can see it with you, what you're saying, like the way you give updates on stories that you're working on, or you're at places till midnight chasing something down. Like, you can see that. I think people do probably connect with that.
Yeah, the last election, I mean, I was the only source of news. It took forever to get our results. And my phone was blowing up, but people from both camps of the mayoral campaigns were all relying on me, because I refused to leave until we had the numbers. I don't care how late I got to stay. And I stayed until 1:30. Holy cow.
You never have seen anything like that, right? I assume most people hadn't seen anything like that.
No,
what was the real reason behind that?
It was well, there was a lot of reasons, and I don't want to jump on the new city clerk right now.
It was her first election.
Yeah, I just think I'm trying to give her the benefit of the doubt. I think she's still, figuring out transitioning. So, well, I I guess on that topic, I want to wait and see.
Yeah.
Certainly, there were a lot of things that went wrong on election night, but there were a lot of different reasons for it. And, so I think we need as a community to pay attention to it. But I'm pretty confident that the new administration and the new city clerk are committed to ensuring that our elections are done the right way with a lot of integrity and voter confidence. So
Well, that's good to hear.
we'll see.
I mean,
Yeah.
it must be tough for someone like her to step in for Carmen. I don't know how long Carmen had been
Carmen
doing it.
was Carmen. Well, Carmen goes back, like me, like 28 some years,
Yeah.
and Carmen was the assistant city clerk when Claremont Matt Thurn was the city. I mean, I remember Claremont, so I mean, we're going back decades. So this was, there were some problems, but hopefully we got those resolved.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah, good learning. It's tough when you have these people that have been in these institutions for a long time. They have so much institutional knowledge, and it
Exactly.
just shows. Like one person leaves, it's hard, So
Oh,
I do
sure.
empathize with that side of things, to
Yeah.
kind of fill in that situation. So
Yeah. We'll see.
I wanted to have you on to talk about this list that you did, and you've mentioned a couple of the people already. Have you gotten good feedback on this? It's the top 20 local political movers and shakers list, an update from one you did in the past. What's the feedback you got on this list?
People love it. They enjoy it. They like to poke fun at themselves. Brian, in fact, a couple of weeks ago, I was taking a whole bunch of brush, like everybody else in the world, to the transfer station, and there were these huge lines on Hill Street, people just waiting to get into me. The guy behind me turns out to be Ryan Fecto.
Mm-hmm.
And he jumped out of his car about the same time I did. So getting rid of our brush, and he's like, "I'm number one, baby. I'm number one." And but I think people like it. They question me. They're like, "How do you think Jeremy Ray is on this list?" Or why is so and so on this list and not so and so? And but people like it. I try to be very light. Kind of use a lot of humor. And now my stepsister is the mayor of Saco, and
Oh, no
so
kidding! I did not
yeah,
realize that. I
yeah,
must have missed
Jody,
that.
who was number 6,
Yeah.
and yet Marty was number 4. And so my
Mm-hmm.
stepmother called me out on the carpet. She goes, "Why is Jody 6 and Marty's 4?" And I said, "Because Marty was a state rep too, so you got to give him a little extra cred." So yeah,
Absolutely.
it's just my
So
list.
it's a fun list. Do you mind if I run through some of them?
Sure, of course, go ahead.
It's funny to see that you put my man Dom as number 20 with some of the things that might be potentially going on. I think he had some pretty good foresight to see with his experience on the school committee, Biddeford Housing Authority. I mean, he's just obviously from a political family. You felt inclined to put him in there as number 20.
Yeah. I mean, and you got to remember that doesn't mean that Dom's like just barely politically relevant. It means he's in the top 20, which I think, I mean, there are a lot of people you think of and you kind of wean through the list. But yeah, Dominic rises up to 20 because one of the things I like about Dom is he's really connected to the old school of Biddeford and the new school. He's also young. And he's ambitious. And so he's going to be around for a while, but I like his approach, and I think he does have influence. His mom lost, but hey, somebody wins and somebody loses. And I've been watching Dom for a while, and I thought he certainly deserved to be on the list for sure.
Yeah. And I was fortunate. I mean, I've known Dom since I was a kid. We played high school sports together. He was a couple of years younger than me, but we served on the school committee together. And he's a guy that certainly has a voice and opinion. And I was happy to see him on the list.
Yep.
Yeah. You threw Jim Bennett on the list at number 19 right after him. You've had a lot of articles about him lately, a lot of conversations about him, conversations on social media. But he obviously is still an important figure in the
absolutely.
community.
There's no question. Jim. Here's the thing. I think the friction between me and Jim Bennett is I think we're a lot alike. I think we have very similar personalities, and so therefore I think there's a little bit of tension or a clash. But Jim, I heard a story about when he was younger, when he was the town manager in Old Orchard Beach many years ago. I had somebody from Old Orchard Beach who was on the council tell me our town was on the brink of financial receivership, and it was Jim Bennett and his talent and his ability, that helped right the ship and basically put us back and get. It was all Jim Bennett. But Bennett is also he has a reputation for being somewhat condescending, in my opinion, very arrogant, super opinionated, and there are a lot of complaints circulating about it. But you cannot deny that he's good at his job, and he does influence people like the mayor and city councilors, and he knows how to get public policy stuff through the gates, like the parking garage. So, you got to give him credit where credit's due. We're trying to put together a meeting so that he and I can sit down, and Marty's agreed to like host us so we can.
It's probably good, right? I mean,
Yeah,
I obviously read the stuff. I mean, that you wrote about him, and I don't know him personally, but it seems like a conversation between the two of you would probably not be a bad thing.
No, absolutely not. I think Jim is. I think he's a smart guy. I think I think his deal is he wants to do what's best for Biddeford. I think he just really gets a little ahead of himself sometimes. So he's a good guy. He's not a bad city manager. And he's certainly in his private life, he's very committed to the Shriners, helping people, and doing fundraising and charity events, and that's really very important to him. And so he's a decent guy. I just think his management approach could be a little bit better, but
Well, I'll look forward to the follow up once you guys get a chance to meet up.
Yeah.
You threw Jim Gubb out on the list, and you already mentioned him in the conversation. Love Jim. He was on the podcast before, but is there a better guy than Jim Gubbo?
I don't think. What I hate about Jim Gumbo is he makes all the rest of us look bad. But Jim understand. Part of Jim's personality is just so agreeable, and he can get stuff done. He knows how to get people involved. He can get people motivated. And I hate to say that he's going to kill me for saying this next part, but any politician in Biddeford knows if they're trying to do fundraising, they probably will knock on his door. He's a guy who can write a check, without it hurting.
But he gets everyone else up to fundraise too. I mean, look what he did with the Waterhouse project, obviously with the St. Andrews project. He puts his money where his mouth is, but he gets everyone else to do it too. So
he's definitely got a sphere of influence over stuff, and he's just such a tremendous guy. I just have just a ton of respect for him. So I feel comfortable with him being on that list for sure.
Yeah, he's a local legend in my eyes.
Yes.
Now,
for sure.
Next guy, Mark Johnston. I did not remember Mark as the mayor of Saco, which is kind of funny because my office was across the street from Vic and Witz. I'd go in there all the time, get sandwiches. I had no freaking clue that he was a former mayor. This was just like 5 or 6 years ago. But he's one of the guys that was left from the list that you did in the past. And why did you still keep him on the list?
Well, in 2012, there was no question that Mark Johnston, we had just gotten rid of Mark. And Mark Johnston was a huge part of that. He certainly had a lot of political influence. So in 2012, I had him ranked as number one. And he slipped down, but I still think he's much more tempered and measured these days, and he doesn't put himself out there or inject himself into conversations. But smart politicians, I feel like, always do kind of say, "Hey, Mark, what do you think about this?" or "Hey, Mark, what do you think about that?" And so he very much has his hand in what's going on. He really didn't want to be on the list. He really thought that I should have a category of just all the people who serve on planning boards, zoning board of appeals, school committee, what have you. And I kind of agree with him, but he does get to still be on the list.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
You also had another former politician, Linda Valentino, although she's not serving anymore. You thought it made sense to keep her on, probably for similar type reasons, or was it
for very similar type reasons? Because Linda is still, she may not be serving right now or an elected official, but still, like when Donna Bailey is, looking to return to the state senate or other Saco politicians, certainly Linda Valentino is a good source to be, to seek her counsel and to seek her advice. So she's still a player in a lot of ways.
Now, have you been in touch with Alan Kassaman at all lately?
Well, yeah. Alan and I, he was nice enough to do a exit interview with me over at Elements when he left back in January. And he doubled down on the parking garage. He actually said, I don't regret the parking garage. He goes, we need another one, actually, near the corner of Alfred and Main. I'm like, you've got some big cojones to say that.
I love it.
He's good. But Alan and I have been friends for a long time. I was Alan's campaign manager
That's right.
because I was working in
Which
PR.
election? The very first one or one of the subsequent ones?
Well, I was his campaign manager for sure in 2001, his first.
Oh,
And
okay.
then he chose me to be the MC during his inauguration.
Yeah.
And I did that again 2 years later, 2013. It's important to remember, I wasn't working for a newspaper back then. I was doing PR.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't charge, despite some community gossip and rumors, there was no money exchange. I was doing it all for free.
Yeah.
And then I was involved in every one. But in 2015, there were things that happened that I thought it was better if I just kind of distanced myself from the mayoral campaign. But
Yep.
but I was part of his team 2015, 2017, 2019, and the last one in 2021. Especially in 2021, there were a bunch of us that really stepped up and wanted to make sure he get that one last term.
Yeah.
So.
Do you ever think of, I'm sure you do, I don't even know why I asked, but like think of him historically and his influence in Biddeford? Like, do you think of him as one of those very influential guys or just another guy that served?
No, he's very influential. Alan joined the city council as an idealistic kid in the 1970s, but he's very, very committed to the city. He really, he can't take all the credit for Biddeford's Renaissance, but he really believed in it. And he's got some political muscle. He's also got some, like I said, some cojones, because I remember this one city council meeting when some of his opponents thought they could box him in, and he was tough as nails, man, and he won. And it was like, don't get in front of Kassaman when he's on a roll. So
That's
I
awesome
think
to
he's a great guy, and he's got his flaws. We disagree about some stuff, but
yeah,
it's okay.
He always seemed like a genuinely good guy. He was actually my favorite teacher in high school, and I would have said that well before he was the mayor. I loved having him in American Studies back in the day.
Everybody says that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sincerely, to see the things that I liked about him as a teacher in class obviously translate well into local and state politics.
Mm-hmm.
And it was fun serving with him on the school committee for the period of time that we did together. And so I asked, like, the way I started was like, have you talked to him lately? It's because I feel like since he left office, he's not answering people's questions about when the garbage is going out on Facebook. He's not entering into all these conversations. I don't see him anymore. So I hope he's enjoying his time in his post-politics life.
Yeah, it's really weird. I always run into him when I'm at Market Basket. we seem to, no matter what. It's not like we have routine times to be there, but yeah, I always run into him at Market Basket. Mm-hmm. And I think, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think Alan is really comfortable with Marty Groman as mayor. And I think Alan just, he's been doing it a long time. I think he's just enjoying his best life. And I think he's like, they gave him the T-shirt, like, remember his last meeting? You got a problem? Not my problem. Not mayor anymore, basically, or something like that.
Well, when you're a mayor, as long as he was, I mean, he put up plenty of crap from beginning to end, especially in this world of Facebook. And that's always the thing that, like, he really was the first mayor that dealt with it in the way that he had to, in terms of like directly answering people in writing in the view of public, and he always did it pretty gracefully, I thought.
Yeah, for the most part. I remember writing a piece that he was really looking. I hypothesized that he was looking forward to retirement so he could cut down his Facebook list, because he didn't want to block anybody, because he wanted to appear open, but there were some people who just drove him nuts. And the first day after not being mayor anymore, boop boop, delete, block. So,
well, I give him credit for that.
I
give him credit for not blocking people, right? Like, I think that's, I mean, when you're a politician, right? Aren't you not supposed to, like, even like the council of the president of the United States, are you not supposed to like block people? Yeah, so it's good that he was able to do that, even though it wasn't.
Marty Groman does it a lot better, because Marty has a personal Facebook account, which he and I are friends on that account, but he does most of his mayor stuff through another account called Marty's Community Corner. So that's where he's engaging, and anybody can engage there. So he's trying to kind of keep his private life, which I don't blame him, a little bit separate. So, yeah.
Yeah, it was always Alan's personal account that was entering into all those conversations.
Yep.
Tim Harrington, big one. He's kind of an outsider, like one of the outsiders on the list, or at least in my eyes. Just someone who probably spends not much time in Biddeford, but his impact on the Biddeford Saco area is large.
Yeah, well, the reason he doesn't spend a lot of time in Biddeford is because he doesn't spend a lot of time anywhere.
Yeah, he's all
Guy's
over the place. It seems like.
constantly in motion. Very approachable guy, but I've always found Tim Harrington to be the real deal. He really tries to have a sense of the community when he's looking at his projects. He tries to, and he's very respectful of the planning board process. He knows how to get things done. He's still continuing to make a huge imprint on Biddeford.
Mhm.
He's one of those real estate developers. We're lucky in this area. There's three guys that come to mind. Him, Mikey on, who did the project that generated all the controversy around Clifford Park, and then Chico.
Mhm.
And all three of these guys really, they're not just trying to ram through projects and make a quick profit. They're really trying to do good investments in Biddeford that will really stand the test of time and serve a lot of people. So I have tremendous respect for them. But Harrington's definitely a mover and a shaker for sure.
Absolutely. And my understanding is he still has projects that are in the planning
Oh
stages
yeah, he does.
in that across the street from the levee part of town,
Yeah.
along the river, which if that stuff all comes to fruition the way people talk about it, it would, man, I mean, what a
Oh
freaking
yeah,
game changer for that part of town.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the Lincoln, I swear to God, there's not a place like it in the state of Maine. So like I tell people, like, if you've never been to Biddeford, it's like, come to Biddeford, go to the Lincoln, you'll love it.
Yeah. Well, just a couple 3 weeks ago, a guy that I worked with at the Courier, and he lives in Portland now, and he's an attorney, but he hasn't been back to Biddeford in years. And so I said, "Yeah, let's go ahead. We'll meet over at the Lincoln." And he walked in, and he was like, "I can't say I don't want to use profanity, but he was like, holy, he says, this is Biddeford." He said, "This is
Yeah.
crazy." He said, how did this happen?" So yeah, the Lincoln's awesome.
It makes me proud of the city personally.
Yeah.
I have no relation to him or the Lincoln or anything, but like I'm proud to say that like that's in the town that I live in, and I'm happy to always point people to it.
The mayor of Saco's husband was at my home, obviously on Christmas,
Yeah.
and he said today, he says, the best thing you can say about Saco is we're pretty close to Biddeford.
Who would have thought? I love that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, love hearing that. How about Delilah? I actually was just talking to her earlier today. They're working on some podcast stuff themselves, but the Heart of Biddeford and what she does is a huge impact.
And
right?
so this is a key time for people like Delilah because the council's really trying to put together their budget, and Heart of Biddeford, annually seeks to have some funding. So I think Delilah, when I was talking to her, I don't know if you saw my story from last week about Biddeford tackling the homeless encampments,
I
but
was going to
Delilah and
bring
I
that up.
sat down. Delilah's one of those people that she's pretty good at being able to herd a lot of different opinions, a lot of different personalities into one room, and to be very respectful and to get good stuff done. So I really have always admired that about her. So, and she's very connected. But again, she's not one of these people. She's not out there seeking the spotlight. She's not trying to use political muscle to force something. But she's definitely influential. Definitely.
Everyone knows what the Heart of Biddeford is too. I mean,
Oh
look, you're
yeah,
from Biddeford. Like everyone, that's something people recognize, which you probably couldn't say, 10 years ago.
yeah.
And they're winning awards and they're having a huge impact.
And with all due respect, I mean, Saco Spirit is nowhere near the muscle that Heart of Bedford is. So.
And they've rebranded since then. I don't even think that's what they are anymore. I think they're Saco Main Street now. So,
yeah, I think they're Saco Main Street. Yeah.
Yeah. So I did not realize that Jody was your stepsister.
Yeah, my
and
youngest stepsister.
It's funny because I didn't know her on the list, so maybe I skimmed over her. But I'm a Biddeford guy. I kind of like push the Saco. I see Saco and I'm just like, I skip over them and go to the Biddeford people. but having read that, that's pretty great that she's the first female mayor in Saco. Yeah. That's quite a deal. That's quite a thing.
I didn't think she was up to the task. When she asked me about, when she was first going to run for council, I'm like, you don't want to do this, that I really thought she was going to be in over her head. And I just said, you don't need the aggravation. I said, I wouldn't, if I were you, I wouldn't do it. She just went ahead and did it. And she's doing a really awesome job, and of course I'm biased, and I have to say nice things so my stepmother doesn't get mad at me. But she's doing fine. And so I can't really cover news in Saco though now, because I just don't want to have to go through, all the tedious steps of disclosure. Randy Seaver is, related to the mayor.
So
So
you
it
kind of
just,
like recuse yourself from that
yeah,
for that
yeah.
reason.
I
Yeah.
mean, unless there's a major, I did cover the shooting that happened in Saco a couple
Mhm.
months ago,
Mhm.
or if there were, God forbid, a big fire or something like that, I might cover it. But on a day-to-day basis, covering City Hall or local news, nope.
Yeah, makes sense. Of course, throw Marty on the list as well.
Yeah, Marty,
Um,
and because Marty's done a lot of smart things, and he's a smart guy, but he's done some stupid things too. Like I don't know
like what?
what I don't know what he was thinking about trying to take on Shelley Pingree as an independent, and that
It's
really,
tough. It's tough to run as an independent, especially against someone like her. Probably pretty
yeah,
well funded.
and that went over like a fart in church. So
Mm-hmm.
I think he learned a lesson there. I think Marty is one of those guys who's very committed. I mean, he's a politician, so he acts like a politician.
Mm-hmm.
Can't really blame him for that.
Mm-hmm.
I really have the sense that he really does care about Biddeford.
Okay.
He's putting in I will tell you, my behind the scenes observations, he's putting in a ton of work. I mean, the mayor's not just the guy that shows up at the council meetings or the school committee meetings. I mean, Marty and I are trading text messages on the weekends, and he's out and doing stuff. So he's very, very committed, and he is very, very smart. Does have a lot of experience, and I think he's doing a good job as mayor so
Absolutely.
far.
Yeah. He does. Like I've known Marty since before he was mayor, but it does seem to me like he is all over the place all the time, like
Mm-hmm.
all in on being a mayor, and I think that's great. He has the capacity to do it. Someone like myself, I couldn't do it. I have kids that are
Right.
younger than his kids' age, and he's in a position to do it. And I think it's kind of what we need.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
So I'll look forward to him leaving his mark. Liam's on there, another young guy that is having an impact on the city council, which is great to see.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
Liam, I mean, I think I used the term of like a wolf with a, doe. We don't take it, predator or prey. I mean, Liam is really super strategic and he's super smart. And that city council president, transition. I mean, everybody was blown away. Like, what the hell just happened? Holy
Mhm.
cow! That was a 6-3 vote. I would have never saw that coming. And that's how Liam's stealth, but he's smart and he's really great. I love him. I think that Liam LaFontaine's perhaps the best Biddeford city councilor that I've ever seen.
Wow.
Without, I feel really comfortable saying that.
And he's got a long future ahead of him too. So
Oh, and that's the thing. He's what, 25, 26,
yeah,
something like that.
yeah, just a
And he's
kid.
younger than my
But
kid.
yeah,
So, but
but he's always been great every time I've gotten a chance to talk to him. So that's
yeah,
great. Just a couple more left. I know we're
sure,
taking a lot of time on this, but it's been fun talking about each of these people. I
sure.
unfortunately skipped a few of them, but
But that's
Jeremy number 2. Did some people question putting him at number 2?
Yeah, they did. And then when I explained it, they were like, "Oh, okay, yeah, well, that makes sense."
Outside of what's in the article, what's like your explanation? Like, why would you do that? I mean, I don't disagree with it actually, but that I
No.
also work hand in hand with him quite often.
So just real quickly, because unlike everybody else on that list, Jeremy has to work through 2 different elected organizations. He's not elected himself, but he has to navigate all sorts of political tensions in 2 different realms, and that's rather unique. He's really good, diligent, responsible, smart. He's very responsive. He knows how to get policy stuff moved through and get stuff done. You look at
Mhm.
the last school bond measure, and it was him who was out there, talking to the media and selling it to the public, and it
Mhm.
passed in a huge margin. He was recently recognized as the best superintendent in Maine. He was Maine Superintendent of the Year.
Now I remember, of
Yeah,
course.
so Jeremy understands the process. He knows how to work with politicians. He knows how to keep his head down during combat, and he always comes through on the other side,
Yeah.
with the trophy. So yeah, he's very astute. I had no I mean, I felt very confident naming him number 2.
Yeah. Seeing what he does on a week to week basis in the school committee, it's very impressive. He obviously has a great grasp on the way things run, and we talk about Carmen and how it's hard to lose someone that has 20 something years. Like
Mm-hmm.
Jeremy's at that point as a superintendent. He's probably the longest tenured superintendent, at least in York County, if not
Yeah,
like York and Cumberland, and one of the top whatever in the state.
yeah.
Like he's at the point where if we lost him, it would be it'd be a big loss to the community. He's had such a positive impact from my point of view.
Yeah, without
You
that.
know? So, and then Ryan was the one that went number one. Why did you put him as number one over all of these people?
Because Ryan has always made the impossible possible. I mean, he was barely out of high school, and he took on David Flood for that House seat in that race. I thought he was never going to make it because David was a well-known and very well-respected businessman, but Ryan Fecto he's always had the political instinct. I mean, he was the president of his student council. He was the student representative on the school committee, back in the day. And my wife,
which we should bring back. We should bring that back. But
yes, we should.
We have not done.
And my wife at that time was on the school committee before she became a counselor, but she was on the school committee back then. And he referred to her as his mentor, but no. So Ryan, he went to Augusta. He did really well. He worked really, really hard. And then he started building relationships from day one. And I mean, he ended up as Speaker of the House. And I'm sorry, I don't care who you are, Democrat, Republican, whatever. That's a huge accomplishment. Yeah, considering his age, he was the first openly gay person to become Speaker of the House. Then you look at what happened, how he transitioned after he left the legislature. He got tapped by the governor to serve on, her housing task force. Mm-hmm. And then he got hired by the state's largest housing provider to be their senior vice president. And now he's running again to take back over Aaron Sheehan's seat because she's getting done. So, yeah, there's no question this kid knows how to move. He knows how to get things done. You don't become Speaker of the House without understanding the political process. So, yeah, there was no question in my mind that he was number one.
Did you go into the whole thing knowing that? Like, was that like an easy one for you? Or
yeah, I know when I first said, "Hey, I'm looking for suggestions from the community. Who do you think it's on the top 20?" But I knew when I was writing that Ryan Fecto. I was like, I wanted to write. I'm going to make Ryan Fecto number one. Prove me wrong. Yeah. It was.
And that's what you went with.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Biddeford's lucky to have him. Obviously, the state is lucky to have him too. So. Yeah, again, he's young. He's got a lot of room to go. Like, we'll look forward to seeing this list in whatever time you do it, another 10 years, 15 years, whatever, and see some of the things that he'd accomplished.
But
very cool.
Ryan will tell you, he's one of those guys who he and I have clashed numerous times in public, head to head, but I think he's a great guy. I think he's doing a good job. So.
Such a good list.
Yeah. Well,
thank you for going over it with me. But before I let you go, I want to talk about just the state of, I guess, Biddeford right now from your point of view. I know one of the articles you wrote about was the homeless stuff. I mean, are we on the upswing still right now, like everyone thinks we are, or are we taking steps backwards with the homeless stuff and some of the other things going on? Like, what do you feel with your boots on the ground?
Yeah, my perception, my take on what's going on in Biddeford right now is we're in a much better position than we have ever been in the last 30 to 40 years. We're in a really strong position, but we do have some huge challenges. That said, those challenges are not unique or specific to Biddeford. We see those challenges in communities all across Maine of any size. Westbrook, Auburn, Portland, Bangor, Lewiston. I mean, we're all struggling with just record, housing is just outpacing incomes. And
it's crazy.
And we have these two mains, like we use median income as the base for determining what's affordable. But the median income is crazy because we've had, since post-COVID, all sorts of people move here from Boston, New York that can telecommute to their jobs. They make really good money, and they're spending their money here, and they can outpace the locals. So, and the homeless issue, again, that's not a Biddeford thing. That's I saw a story about people sleeping in their cars at the Walmart in Scarborough. So, I mean, and Jim Bennett, we'll go back to Jim Bennett for a second. I mean, last year during a public meeting, he said, this is perhaps the most complex and difficult public policy issue to face any municipal leader. And I tend to agree with him.
Yeah.
It's a
because there's not a good solution. Yeah. There's not a good solution for it. And it is interesting. I mean, it's not interesting, but like you say, it's not a Biddeford thing. It's really not. But sometimes people make it seem like it's a Biddeford thing. Like it's it doesn't make sense to me because it is everywhere. It's in Saco. It's in every community across the country. There are people living in tents someplace in the town or city.
Biddeford is one of those communities, here in Maine, and every state has them, but Biddeford is one of those communities that people like to just poke fun at. We used to be called Lewiston by the Sea.
Oh, yeah.
There's that whole, Westbrook has their own image problem. And people like to just, they like to think that everything's bad in Biddeford. And there's a bunch of negative nannies out there. And they just don't stop to think about, Jesus, is this really just Biddeford? And it's not just Biddeford. And Biddeford is actually really up there and is excelling in addressing the problem and moving forward in the problem. And just because you still see people living in tents or sleeping in doorways, it does not mean that people in Biddeford, that Biddeford's leaders are not working like 24/7 to address the problem. It's just not easy.
In the article, you mentioned that they're going to relocate some of they're working to enact some policy changes and relocate some of the homeless encampments. Is that stuff been publicly made available yet, or is that still TBD?
No, yeah. Well, as Marty said, he's hoping to have some stuff to present at the next regular council meeting on May 7th, but I don't know if I'm going to expect real details, just more specifics about how we're going to move toward the final product. So yeah, it's a work in progress, but I think what Marty is signaling is that Biddeford's ready to, well, for lack of a better words, we're going to drop the hammer on this because we have two competing things. One, nobody should have to be living outside. I think we can all agree on that. Number two, we can't just tolerate all sorts of behaviors and all sorts of, so we have to walk a very difficult line, which is right now, as we speak, is winding its way through the U.S. Supreme Court with a town in Oregon about homeless and being able to prohibit encampments and stuff. So this is a very tricky, dicey issue. And people tend to stereotype the unhoused as, they're drug users, they're mentally ill, they're criminals, what have you. Not all of them, man. A lot of homeless people work 40 hours a week and they just can't find a place to live.
Well, there was one of the people you profiled in your article, I think her name was Melinda, who seems like she doesn't seem that way. Her husband has, what is it, epilepsy, and they just couldn't afford rent anymore, so they're living in a tent. I mean, I don't know that they're drug users. I didn't, it didn't seem that way in the article, but like they're just people that couldn't afford the freaking housing.
Well, if you go down, I mean, I'm just going to be really brutally honest with you for a second. And I did a 3-part series on homelessness last year where I interviewed all the players, and including homeless people. But if you go down to the encampment, there's 2 distinct odors that you notice as you're walking toward it. It's one, the smell of human urine, and the other smell is marijuana. I mean, it's just, And while I'm there interviewing people, identifying myself as a reporter, they're actually, hitting up a crack pipe in front of me. I mean, without a care in the world, and I'm like, holy cow. And I interviewed this one other woman who was clearly, she was just, stoned out of her mind. And she, but if I were homeless, Randy, I think if I were living in a tent 24/7, maybe I might be hitting the crack pipe too, or looking for some kind of relief, because it's a really crappy way to live. So you got to be kind of careful when you're judging them. But there are some problems. There are some problems. So it's hard.
I'll definitely look forward to your reporting on what happens in the city and other cities close by. I agree with what you said. Jim Bennett said it's something that's not easily solved, and I just don't know that it's going to be solved for a long time, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So
it's really sad.
But listen, thank you so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate it. That was a fun conversation. Hope it was okay on your end of things. Not too bad.
It was awesome. I had a blast.
It was fun. Hopefully you're up for doing it again sometime. I'd love to have you come back to chat about future stories and other things going on in town. You're a great resource, like I said, for the community. And hopefully people enjoy this podcast.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, Randy.
All right. Thanks, bud.